Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest this week is Aimee Rinehart, Deputy Director at First Draft. She's formerly with the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Overseas Press Club of America. We'll be talking about her work at First Draft, fighting disinformation. We'll also talk about her time at the New York Times, the early days of when the New York Times went online. This week's edition has several special sections and reports that we'll be looking at, including a special report on the burlesque community in New York City and the New York Times for Kids special section. There's also a year without travel. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan, the Marshall Loeb Professor at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and co-founder of DigiMentors. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we're also live on Aimee's Facebook and Twitter accounts. Thank you, everyone who's watching us there. Again, my name is Neil Parekh. I'm the Vice President of Events and Communications at DigiMentors, Executive Producer of the New York Times Read Along, and occasional guest host. Let's go ahead and welcome some of our guests. Laura Silverman is watching from Philadelphia. Laura, always great to have you. And when we get to the New York Times for Kids, we'll definitely do a special shout out to your niece, I believe it was, who has a comment in the paper. Please correct me if I'm wrong. My mom is watching from Hastings-on-Hudson. Hi, Mom. How you doing? Good to see you. Jonathan Borstein watching from the East Village. Diane Stefani from South Jersey, Margate, if I'm not mistaken. Lisa Herndon is watching as well. One of our early risers, Doug Levy, watching from the Bay Area in California, 5:30 in the morning for you. Doug, always appreciate that. Naomi Service, thank you for joining from the Upper West Side, not far from where Sri lives. Nicole, watching from the Maldives. Thank you, Nicole. Always great to have you joining our show. Patricia Freudenberg, watching from New York. Patricia, thank you for watching as well. Roy Wadia from Bangkok. Again, it's an international show, and one of the things that we try and do when we're talking about the news to make sure that we provide a little bit of extra context for people watching outside of the U.S. So thank you, Roy, for joining us. Francesca Burks watching from Ardsley, not far from my hometown of Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. So one of the things that we want to do is to recognize our team that puts the New York Times Read Along together every week. In addition to Sri and myself, Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranauckas do an incredible job of bringing the New York Times Read Along to you. One of the things that we do is we actually have staff watching in Facebook and LinkedIn to make sure to provide context, to answer questions, to provide links to articles. It really does set this show apart, I think, from many others. So thank you very much, again, Paula, Steve, Julia, and Carla, for all of the work that you do every week. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on Sri Srinivasan. Sri, good morning. How are you today?
And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. We love having you here. This is the 5th year plus of the New York Times Read Along, and just so grateful for this incredible community, and so grateful to the entire team led by Neil for being here with Carla, Steve, Paula, Julia. Thank you. And we're so excited to have you meet our guest in just a few minutes. I want to welcome everyone and want to hear where you're watching from. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Please tell us what's on your mind, what you've been thinking about with the news, and so much more.
Absolutely. Before we start, Sri, if you could say a word about our sponsor, MuckRack.
Yes, MuckRack.com. Please check them out. They've been supporters and partners of ours for a long time. If you're a journalist, you know them. If you are in PR, you know them. They do incredible work. Please check out MuckRack. And we'd love to have you sponsor us. If any of you have something you'd like to promote, please get in touch with us. You see our email addresses on the screen.
Thank you, Shri. And one of the things that we mentioned earlier, and you have your mug as well, and the backside, the MuckRack octopus. One of the things that we mentioned earlier is that Sri is the co-founder of DigiMentors. I'm the vice president of events and communications. A little bit about our work, Sri.
Yeah, we are delighted that I could work with such an incredible team. You're seeing their work on the screen right now with the read along, but we do talk shows like this for other people, webinar summits, conferences. We're doing hybrid events as the world sort of starts heading back to normal, training workshops, etc. So please be in touch with us if you'd like to work with us. Our website is digimentors.group if you want to check out the website. Otherwise, be in touch with Neil or with me.
Thank you very much. And before we go forward, want to check in with a few more people who have joining us. Ralph Blumenthal, a recent guest on our show. Ralph, thank you for watching. Renee Edelman, a longtime friend and supporter of the work that we do. Linda Lawrence, watching from Long Island. Diana, watching, another early riser from the Bay Area. Always great to see you. And our friend Stefan Kaplan, watching from Ramsey, New Jersey. Pradnya Haldapur, watching from Silver Spring, Maryland, from the DMV, as we like to say. DC.
Yeah, only you guys say that. No one else in the world knows what the heck that is. Sunny Slaughter first mentioned it on when she was a guest, and I did not know what that was. But you folks are wedded to that term, and we're all having to learn it.
You thought we were at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Yes. It's the DC, Maryland, Virginia. So that's the regional area that we're sitting
in. It's also
in.
called. People also refer to the capital area region.
The capital area, capital region. One of the things that's challenging when you talk about the capital area, and this is from my work with United Way, Michigan talks about the capital area around Lansing. Louisiana talks about the capital area. So that really doesn't, any state at least has a capital area.
New York has the Albany National Capital. Yeah, they have a capital region.
But what with the other term you could use is the Delmarva Peninsula. Sometimes people would refer to Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, which is off the eastern side of where we're at. But usually DMV works, at least locally. Ted Coltman is joining from Washington, D.C., and Linda Lawrence is jumping into the news right away. We'll certainly get to the legislation in Georgia. She's referring to voter suppression laws and
among other things.
Among other things.
Yeah, when people are waiting in line for water for 10 hours, it's now illegal to give them any water. So this is to discourage people from standing in line for all those hours.
Roy Wadia is talking about the violence in Myanmar, the coup that took place about a month ago, I think now, and the violence over the last day or so.
The bloodiest day, more than 100 people killed as the protesters are fighting on.
Our friend Makran Boot is wishing us a happy Holi, and Nicole as well. And as I was going to say, a happy Passover, happy Pesach to everyone who is observing. Last night was the first Seder. So thank you, Nicole, for bringing that up. And another great question. Ellen is joining us from New York City, but Linda, we should make sure when we get to page 3, Sri, our readers are curious about what happened to the Tiffany ad in the upper right corner. So we won't get there yet. When we get to the paper, we will tell that story, Linda. You at least have to wait until we get there. But with that, I think, Shri, we should bring on our guest and remind people again that our guest is Aimee Rinehart, Deputy Director of First Draft, former New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Overseas Press Club of America. So I will hand it over to you and
All right. Thanks very much, Neil. And everyone, check out Aimee's Twitter handle. It's Aimee T2Es. That's what she's telling you. That is her Twitter handle. Hi, Aimee. Thank you very much for being here. Our first question always is, how are you? Where are you? And how's your family handling the pandemic?
Thank you. I'm well, thank you. I'm in Harlem right now. I spent the first 5 months of the pandemic in my home state of Indiana with my mom. She was gracious enough to host us, and that was back when Indiana didn't seem like such a hot spot, and now the fortunes have reversed. And I feel safer in New York, actually. But yeah, it was good to be there for the beginning of the pandemic. My immediate family is fine. Many people, though, my father, mother, sister, and niece all have had coronavirus. They've all thankfully recovered. And they keep, my sister in particular has recurring episodes. I think she's called a long hauler. So yeah, we're managing. My son has been in school 2 days in the past month, and the rest of the time it's been online. So that's challenging in 850 square feet uptown.
Well, I'm glad that you got to spend time in your home state. That's always wonderful, and a side effect for so many people is they're getting to see their parents or grandparents in ways they would not have otherwise. And then, of course, on the other side, there are people like us whose families are very far away and we haven't seen grandparents and parents, but we're hoping with vaccines being rolled out, things will get better. Let's see, folks are joining us from all over, and we are very grateful to having folks here. Here's Miriam saying hello from Hell's Kitchen. We had our friend Ron Thomas watching from Dubai. So just great to have this international community here with us. So we want to talk about the news in the New York Times and the news of the week, but let's start by hearing a little bit about First Draft and tell us about the work you do there.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been with First Draft since a week before the 2016 election. And at the time, we were looking at verifying user-generated content. So if somebody was at a concert, there might have been a mass shooting. The videos that would come in, we would make sure that we knew, we would interrogate it the same way that a journalist does in traditional media, which is, who, what, when, where, why, how, but using digital tools to do that. And when I first signed on, like the biggest thing we could imagine was like copyright infringement. And then 2 weeks after the US election in 2016, people were very interested in fake news, is what they called it. And it escalated from there. So we've been really holding on by our fingertips since 2016. We got together and started doing collaborative election projects. So we got newsrooms, 35 newsrooms in France to agree to drop the competition around verifying content online and collaborate together and put their logos against it. And that project won an online journalism award. And we've iterated that since, once in Brazil. And we had a project in the US for the 2020 election where we trained more than 1,000 journalists. We were lucky enough to train them in person before the pandemic really took hold. And then we've continued to train them online and then provide, from our research team, provide insights for the narratives that we're seeing online. And, we said we would cover everything that would happen in 2020. I thought it might be like hurricanes and the Olympics, but the pandemic really took over and shifted the narrative quite a bit. So we try and give as much insight to newsrooms and some training to newsrooms so that they can do this work independently. When flashpoints happened this past year, like in Detroit, when people took over the State House there were photos that were going around trying to identify people, and some people were misidentified. And we were, the Detroit Free Press asked us for help if we could help them verify these people. And we were able to do that with them. And so that's the kind of network we have strived to build and to be able to connect journalists with the information they need to get their job done, because most local newsrooms are not able to resource for somebody who's a specialist with online content.
Patricia says, First Draft News has revolutionized the true meaning of investigative reporting. Thank you. Nicole, watching in the Maldives, says, this sounds very helpful and necessary. We'll add it to my hoax debunking toolbox, along with Snopes and PolitiFact. So you've got a new fan here. And
Great.
Chris Gorman's watching in Manhattan with his very young daughter. So welcome to the Gormans. And can you tell us a little bit about like the business model and how big is the team and how can people support what you're doing?
Right, yeah, well, our business model, we're a non-for-profit. So we are a registered 501c3, and we take funding from the common journalism funders. So Knight Foundation, Craig Newmark, Omidyar, OSF, Ford Foundation, and many others. The list of our funders is on the About page on firstdraftnews.org. And we're lucky to have a broad range of funders, and yeah, so that's really how we are sustaining ourselves at the moment. There's a couple of business models we could probably spin out at some point, but right now we really like to remain a nonprofit. So when smaller organizations want and need this training, we're able to offer it for free because we've been funded to do so.
Thank you. And let's hear a little bit about your other parts of your journalism career. We'll end with the New York Times, but let's talk about other places you've worked.
Well, I started at the National College magazine. It was a parade magazine for student newspapers, basically. So an insert. And this is a photo of me about to take off for California from my home then in Indiana. You can see we're at the base of a cul-de-sac. So you can't get more American than that. And I drove my car cross country with a friend, and I worked there on a fellowship for a year. We lived and worked together, and we lived in Santa Monica. Arnold Schwarzenegger was our landlord, and down the street, the Real World LA was filming. So in terms of just surreal, I mean, yes, it's not uncommon in New York to have an immigrant as your landlord. My immigrant happened to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in California. So that was just a great it was great to see how the movie industry worked, how these types of how you can get interviews, how those interviews play out on the page, and to be connected with such a smart, fun, young group of optimistic people in LA. And LA was kind of just our playground for a year, and I really enjoyed that experience, and also felt like I wasn't completely rooted in LA. It wasn't, it was a huge departure from my upbringing in the Midwest. And so I went back to the Midwest and was a reporter for about 4 months and really didn't like that. It was for a small town paper in Indiana. They would call me the girl from the Comical Tribune. They would call me Lois Lane, or the girl from the Comical Tribune was another thing. And it just didn't suit. And I had the opportunity to have an illegal sublet in New York City, and off I went. So, I went to New York to work in magazines, or at least that's what I told my parents, because I had to come up with an industry that Indiana didn't have. And then suddenly this thing called the web came out, and this was in 1995. And, it really changed everything. It changed the dynamics of looking for a job. I found my first job in New York from the New York Times classified ads. And soon after, everything was online, which really, I don't want to say democratized it fully, but you didn't necessarily have to have an Ivy League connection to get into a newsroom. And so I ended up at the New York Times Online. And it was the kind of my first, I don't want to say home. I don't like using family references to work, but the hours that we worked from 4 in the afternoon until 1 or 2 in the morning really did bond us. There's a photo of me, and you can see my big boxy computer screen. But I was really relaxed there. It was a lot of fun. We covered, during my time there, we did our first giant PDF, which was of the Ken Starr report, and covered the impeachment hearing of Bill Clinton, the contested election of 2000. It was kind of, well, I guess the news cycle is always nonstop, but it felt in particularly potent at that time. And we were working on this grand experiment. So I wasn't there in 96. I started in 98. But when I did arrive, we were using the homepage image map. So this is one big image. So if you went to NewYorkTimes.com in 1996, all the way to about the middle of the year of 1998, you would encounter this image. And if you are on dial-up, you probably went to NewYorkTimes.com, went and got a coffee, came back, and the page finally loaded. But at the time, we probably published 12 to 15 articles a day from the Times, and this is one such example of that. And then, of course, some people who signed on early might remember AOL and how the New York Times also offered about a dozen stories on there every night. And Sean Gallagher, I think, was one of our first AOL drivers at the time. And it was just, this was all like a grand experiment. When I arrived at the New York Times Online, the editorial outnumbered the business side. So, that's really unusual in a newsroom, especially in the newsroom the size of the New York Times. So in some ways, it just felt like, I don't know, that we kind of we were like seniors and and not freshmen in high school, even though we were definitely new to the news business. And I wouldn't have been able to work in the New York Times newsroom any other way than, having an email address at the time and a willingness to learn the web. We were not even in the New York Times building when we started. Part of that, I think, was possibly to have some autonomy. And I know that 43rd Street had long been crowded, so there was probably not a place to put us, but we were geographically 2 avenues away from the mothership. And so we were very much not part of the news system traditionally. And I remember sitting around thinking, oh, one of these days, maybe if I'm on the politics desk, I'll actually be sitting amongst the politics desk people in the newsroom. And I think that they're there now, but it took them about 20 years for that to happen.
It's so great to hear this background. And I had the honor of working for a summer as a faculty consultant intern, sort of at the old digital desk of the New York Times when it was in that other building. And I think there was that autonomy, there was that little bit of that freedom, and folks did amazing work. I worked with Kevin McKenna, who's been a guest on the show. He's deputy business editor of the New York Times, and Martin Miesenholtz and others there, John Haskins. And this is a photograph of, you can see Kevin in the white shirt and tie, though I see a lot of shirt and ties there. You see him, the gentleman with the hands on his hips there. And this was the launch of the NYTimes.com website, I believe in '96. And that's what you're seeing there. Not a lot of diversity, I should say. I don't see, I think one woman in that photograph, but this was, the way things were at that time.
I offered diversity, Shri. I was a state school graduate. But it was, it wasn't until I really switched to, I've gone back and forth with communications for nonprofits. There were just not people of color in high numbers at the New York Times. And it wasn't until I switched to that communications role that I actually worked with people, a more diverse workforce. And it made me look back on those times. I loved all the people I work with. They were so smart, so engaged, ready to try anything, but we were pretty homogenous.
Let's see who else is watching with us. Carol says this is wonderful. And Andy Revkin, longtime New York Times journalist, says Kevin McKenna was great to work with. Absolutely. And Carla Baranauckas, who helps produce this show, says when the print and digital newsrooms were in 2 different buildings, 2 avenues apart, a representative of digital had to walk over to the main New York Times building to attend the news meeting each day. And I remember Kevin once took me to that page 1 meeting, and we had to make that trek over. Eve is watching from North Carolina. And Patricia's noticing the size of the old computers and the floppy disks that are lying around. Susan saying hello from the Hudson Valley. Stefan, who was at the New York Times for 20 years as a photo editor, says, the old newsroom, love it. And this folks, Mary Jane's watching from Long Island. And Tim is watching from Northeast Pennsylvania. Folks, tell us where you're watching from. Tell us how your Sunday's going. And we'd love to hear from you. And Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar is watching. She and her friend Marina Curry and two surgeons host a show at 11 a.m. Eastern, which our team produces, called She's on Call. And we'll tell you more about that. Oh, we'll tell you now. What in the back is going on? Spine surgery and spine rehab. My wife has had spine surgery, such an important topic, and they have two doctors who are going to be with them at 11 a.m. Eastern. Just find She's on Call on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube, and you can watch She's on Call, and I'm honored to executive produce it with our team. So great to have everybody here, folks. If you are new to this is the New York Times Read Along. We'll read the New York Times and talk to Aimee Rinehart of First Draft News, who used to be at the New York Times. So what I'm going to do now is switch on my New York Times camera so we can do a quick tour, and would love to hear Aimee's analysis of what's going on with the news. So let's start by just looking at the front page of the paper. But first, I should just say there aren't as many sections here today because as some of you who know, or if you've ever lived in New York and gotten the print subscription, it arrives on Saturday. About half the paper arrives on Saturday, including the magazine, the book review, and things like that. And then the other half arrives on Sunday. And we thought we had set aside the Saturday section, but in 26 years of subscribing, I had never lost it between one day and the next. But somehow it's been misplaced in this house twice in a month. So we have fewer sections here, but with Neil's help and with digital versions, we'll show you the rest of the paper. But this is what I was able to get on Sunday morning. But this tells you there's so much to read, just this. You know, it's impossible to get through this, let alone both the rest of the paper as well. So that's interesting. Let's just look at what's on these sections. The Sunday business cover is "The House Always Wins, Especially Now. Lockdowns help the online betting company Bet365 hit the jackpot. For addicted gamblers, it's been a disaster. Reporting the horror again and again. Journalists struggle with the constancy of a uniquely American tragedy, the random gun massacre." The Sunday Styles cover is "I Want My Friends, But How Many? Social circles narrowed in the pandemic, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. Idol stars walk a tricky tightrope. To stay in the public eye, some celebrities are falling on their high-profile faces." I've not read that story yet. And the at-home section is "We're breaking through the bubble. We're brushing up on our social skills as we think about re-entry." What is your guess on how long they will have the at-home section, which I think was absolutely brilliant? How long do you think they'll keep that? Through the summer, I presume? Let's go in here, and we're looking at the Sunday Review, where the county where cops call the shots. Fiscal conservatives and liberal activists both want to curb the power of police unions in Suffolk County, New York. Can they do it? And this is a very dramatic cover here, and I look forward to reading that story. For 50 years, I was denied the story of my birth. Adoptees deserve better. And here is how the trauma of gun violence fuels a cycle of more violence. And also, what if all these people claiming to be fighting for the future of women's sports would really fight for the future of women's sports? This is an issue that comes up now because of the basketball tournaments that are happening in the U.S. in college basketball, and how the men's and women's tournaments are treated. All right, let's take a look at the front page. And by the way, hello to Neil Genslinger, longtime New York Times journalist and someone who's been a guest on this show twice in our 5.5 years. So thank you, Neil, for being with us. And David's here, David Clinch, great to see you. I know you know Aimee and her amazing work. Thank you, David, for being here. All right, let's take a look at the front page. And first, I want to see if Aimee has any reactions to seeing the page and talking about the changes that you have seen over time.
Well, I think one of the things that we lose with like the social media news feed is the prioritization of news. And what I love about the New York Times front page is, you know, you've got your lead on the right side, you've got your off lead on the left, and then you have your meat and vegetables above the fold. And then everything below the fold is like nice if you can get to, but you could probably live your life without having read those items. And I love that, because when you're on Facebook or Twitter, everything is the same weight or same value. And what's nice is to have the giant thoughtful brains that have been well trained in the New York Times newsroom decide what goes where and why. And what's interesting too is if you compare late editions to earlier editions to see what got reshuffled, if there was some breaking news that took precedence or priority. It's always interesting to see how they lay it out. And to do my job, I like to see how the Washington Post and the New York Times play the news, and then go to websites like Breitbart, Drudge Report, and see what are the prioritizations that they make in their news.
Thank you. We're looking here at a day of shame in Myanmar. We were discussing the situation there. Dozens of people, including several children, were killed as the security forces cracked down on protests across the country. And American Dream undone by the unimaginable. Beautiful headline. Boulder suspect tears families' lives apart, including his own. And that was the American Dream that they're talking about. Mistrust, lies, and a variant ravage Brazil. And earlier I'd seen a comment from Apollo talking about how Brazil was in deep trouble and their health system is almost at the point of collapse. And of course, that their president lied constantly and downplayed the pandemic. And we saw the impact of that here in the US as well. Waiting to be alive again. Burlesque has a rich history in New York City. And after a year of venues being shut down, performers are craving the intimacy of a live audience. There's also some hesitancy about returning to touchy fans. And we'll take a look at that section in a little bit. And Manchin's votes make or break policy in the Senate. What do you think about this? One man having so much power, along with Senator Sinema. This is a Democrat who, because of the 50-50 tie, has he's a more conservative or less progressive senator.
Yeah, very much like from my home state of Indiana. It's like if you get a Democratic senator from Indiana, they're pretty conservative, and that's Joe Manchin to a T.
Yeah, I saw that David Clinch had said he wants to hear us both talk about the boat coverage, and here it is on the front page. What's happening at the Suez Canal? Does rising tide lift all boats at Suez? They'll soon find out. What do you make of the story and how it's captured the imagination of so many people?
Well, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's going to be on the news a lot because visually it's pretty amazing. But it'll be interesting to see, and from a part of the world that, I mean, if we hear anything from that part of the world, it's not usually not necessarily this is positive, but it's not war. It's not factions fighting. It's a boat that is literally stuck in a canal. So it'll be interesting. It's not surprising necessarily, but that it's on the front page. I almost said homepage of the New York Times today, but it's still very much in the forefront of people's mind. And
what you have to do if you're at the New York Times is make sure that the print stories are written in a way that's got more analysis, because breaking news could overtake it at any point, right? Yep. And here is on this day, I love this little feature. This is that horrific crash, at that point, the worst in aviation history, where two jumbo jets crashed into each other. And I saw a kind of made-for-TV film about this. So this is about what happened in March 28, 1977. 580 passengers died in this crash. Really terrible story. We were asked earlier about the New York Times Tiffany ad that used to run here from 1917 onwards every single day. We were told that by Stuart Elliott, the longtime columnist for advertising at the New York Times, and he was a guest on this show, and he talked about that. But for the last few weeks, it's not been there. And there's Linda asking about that. When you get to the paper, what happened to the Tiffany ad? And that's one of the changes. There's been some business news around Tiffany and a merger, a purchase, etc. Lives rearranged. For them, New York City will never be the same. I'm starting like all new. And these are really interesting portraits of various people affected by this. This person, a financial technology consultant, misses the spontaneity of life before COVID and having like 40 or 50 things that I can get FOMO over, fear of missing out. How is your fear of missing out?
Me,
Yours, Aimee. Yeah.
The pandemic lifestyle somewhat agrees with me, but I'm in a privileged position. I'm able to work from home. My son is at home, and I've got some coping mechanisms. I got a used car and a puppy, so it hasn't been terrible necessarily, but certainly I miss strolling around New York City on the way to nowhere, with no agenda and feeling free. I haven't really been in stores since I've been back since August. So yeah, there's a lot that's lost and I can't wait to get back to.
Yesterday I was on the subway after many months, and there was somebody who was sitting across from me who had her mask on. By the way, really good masking in the subway. And at one point she pulled down her mask so that I could see who she was. Otherwise, we did say hello after she took off her mask, but otherwise I wouldn't have known who she was because of that mask. And that's sort of the small world of New York City, that you could go on the subway after many months and ride with somebody but we could have not said hello if she didn't recognize me in my mask.
Yeah.
After suicide of loved ones, toll of long isolation is felt. This pandemic upends teaching. Fewer are choosing to study it. So that's interesting. We've seen stories about nursing and medicine and public health becoming more popular and people going back to school for that. But looks like teaching isn't getting that same boost. High in the Himalayas, a magical escape from it all. And this is from a story out of Kashmir about what's happening there. And let's see, Serbia hails Chinese investors as saviors. And we know this story is happening all over the world. Modi protests turned deadly in Bangladesh. So this is the 50th anniversary of the founding of Bangladesh. So lots of stories around that. The Khashoggi investigator for UN details threat by Saudi official. And this is that story out of Myanmar about a day of shame. World condemns a day of shame. And Israel's long shadow war with Iran moves to open waters. And more about this sleepy village, which is in the shadow of the Suez Canal's drama that's happening there. Look at the number of microphones. Wow. And and there's somebody who lives in this very small house in the shadow of that. Feel free to jump in as you look at anything here or you see the coverage, how it's covered. Indian Prime Minister's new media rules could silence news outlets. There are a lot of digital-only websites that have come out in the last few years in India, and there are new rules that are going to silence them. New problem for climate. Riders leave public transit. And the subway, certainly in New York, was not anywhere near where it should have been. And look at this picture of the London Underground operating at 20% of normal capacity. We presume some of that will change as people go back to work, but still lots to think about. Under Biden, foreign diplomacy has become a coveted career again. And this is about foreign service officers. So much to read. We've only gotten through the first few pages of the paper. It's pretty amazing.
It's been a long time since I've subscribed to the newspaper. In fact, it's been 9 years, which is when my son arrived. I am not able to enjoy the print edition in quite the same way that I used to when I was just single. I don't know if you experienced that, Shri, if you have to carve out your own time or this time to read the paper.
Yeah, in fact, that's absolutely right. I used to get up when my twins, they're now high school seniors, and by the way, it goes very fast. When I had to get up earlier than they did in order to read the paper, because that was important, and so I used to do that. But it's certainly not easy. Lots here. Look at this, 10 people shot, 2 fatally in Virginia Beach. And DNA profile identifies remains as mother who just picked up her stuff and left. And this was 50 years ago, and they just discovered what happened to her. Very sad. And I'm an Obits fanatic. Do you read the Obits?
That's one of my favorite sections. I love to see how people, like, if they became famous, like, when did they become famous? How many times were they married? Did they choose not to marry? Did they have kids? Did they decide not to have any kids? I love to see people's trajectories, and also to see how some of the world's problematic people are remembered in obituaries. And I spoke with someone at the Detroit Free Press, Anjanette Delgado, who said, there are no real obituary writers in local newspapers anymore. It's all sent in by the family, which is problematic if that person was a public figure and you really need to set the record straight that, they were caught embezzling or they weren't such a nice person as maybe what their family might remember. So there's a lot of things lost without a professional obituary writer. And the New York Times has some of the best reporting on people who have been in the headlines for part or all of their lives.
And by the way, here's a byline by Neil Genslinger, who's watching the show right now. And he's a former guest on the show. And it's so good to hear about stories like this. This woman who started her career as a secretary and became a respected financial advisor, Bernadette Bartels Murphy. These are stories that you would typically never hear unless you were reading the Obits. And here, are you a sports fan?
I am and I'm not. I don't keep up with like who's ahead and who's behind. But coming from Indiana, I mean, I've got basketball in my background for sure. And I've been following. Indiana makes North Carolina State. I've been following the discrepancies and disparities between the women's teams and the men's teams of the NCAA. So that's been interesting.
All right, where would you like to go next?
Well, someplace. I mean, the front section is really tough. Let's go. Maybe Sunday Styles is my next stop usually.
Okay, we'll go there. And folks, if you're just joining us, this is Aimee Rinehart of First Draft News, and this is the Sunday New York Times Read Along. We do this every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, and we're so grateful to all of you for being with us. We've been doing this for more than 5 years, and we're always looking for interesting guests. And please do get in touch if you'd like to make a suggestion for somebody who should be with us. And just great to see all the comments coming in. Nicole asks, any coverage of the World Figure Skating Championships? I did not notice that there, but I've noticed that during the pandemic, there's fewer pages for sports. So maybe it's online and not in the print section. Okay, I want my friends, but how many? And we talked about the kind of pandemic lifestyle, and this is about how social circles have narrowed in the pandemic. So your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And it's not been all terribly bad. I mean, I do miss people, but I do like the amount of family time it's sort of forced and required me to look at like, how am I spending my time online? And I've really tried to cut back on Zoom meetings and to instead of having an hour-long call, make it 30 minutes or 15. So I do think most people are taking a look at like how overplanned their lives were pre-pandemic, and maybe going into the future that they'll make some edits in their own lives, and certainly with their kids too.
Here is a story I had not noticed before. Nicknames for these trying times. Some people are calling it a panini or a pandemimore or quarantinis, all these words that are coming up that are associated with the pandemic. All gas, no brakes is apparently a very popular YouTube channel, a travel channel. And this gentleman in this oversized suit, he and his buddies would drive all over the country in an RV. And he's lost access to this because he signed a contract. So what's happening with all these new creatives is interesting. And then, I don't know if you noticed, this story was big online this week. A tempest tumbles from a cereal box. Somebody says he found shrimp tails in a cinnamon toast crunch. And then, of course, the internet went crazy. And do you read the Modern Love column?
That's one of my first destinations in here. Yeah.
And we had the editor of the Modern Love column, the podcast, and the series on with us, and it was so great to talk all about this. So you can find that episode from a few weeks ago. It was for Valentine's Day, which was great. Tiny love stories. I'm just going to read this because we can't read the big one here. My mother, my friend. My first semester of college, I only called my mother twice. At my house, I felt generally misunderstood and judged for my weight. At school, I was finally free. But the pandemic forced me home. I spent the first months in my room. Then my mom and I started watching Chinese competition shows together, bonding over the contestants. Now I make sure she's eating even when she avoids meals to stay thin. We converse in simple Mandarin, a language I hadn't bothered to learn before. I buy her flowers and cry when I think of leaving her, by Annabelle Wong. And having spent time with your family, this must touch a chord.
Absolutely. I mean, my mom and I weren't very close until my son arrived 9 years ago. And then we were basically on the phone all the time. I didn't expect to live with her for 5.5 months. We definitely encroached on her retired lifestyle. My son and I are a little louder than what she's used to having around. But there are things like I really miss having coffee on her back porch in the morning before my day started. And that's, it's a real gift. I hadn't had that before. And I'm grateful. If I'm grateful for anything for the pandemic, it's definitely that.
All right, we're going to look at the social cues column, which I love, by Philip Galans. And we're going to ask a question. I'm going to ask you the question. There's no right or wrong answer, as you know. It's a etiquette question. Don't put your dog's poop here. I pride myself on being a responsible dog owner. Not only do I pick up my dog's poop, I also pick up litter on the street. I throw it into garbage cans, both public and private. Recently, I saw a post on a neighborhood message board lamenting the fact that people are dumping dog poop in the poster's garbage can while it is at the curb on garbage pickup day. He wrote, "Am I supposed to let it stink up my garbage for a week? Don't do this." So the question that Roger asks, am I wrong to use whatever bins I see? I've wondered about this. Do you have a thought?
Well, I've been yelled at for using somebody's bin, and you're not really supposed to use private bins. You are supposed to use New York City public bins. And I'm a new puppy owner. We got a puppy in December. It does smell, and there is a reason why we take our shoes off as soon as we hit the front door of my apartment, because the New York City sidewalks are covered in all kinds of dog things. So I appreciate people who pick it up, and I'd rather have it in a private bin than no bin at all. But you're not really supposed to use the private bins.
All right, here's the answer. Of course you're wrong. A homeowner's private garbage can is not for public use, even when it's on the curb on trash collection day. No. The message board post is persuasive in its reasoning. Would you want dog poop moldering in your garbage until the following week's trash pickup? Use your city's public receptacles instead. I guess the problem, as you well know, is that often you can't find a garbage can, and so you're especially if you're picking up other people's garbage.
Yeah, and it's full, right?
Yeah, and it's full. Yeah, in New York, you often find them completely full. Here is the wedding section. Of course, it's changed. When we talk about change at the New York Times, this is one of the sections that has changed in terms of having same-sex marriages and other kind of mix of folks here. By the way, this I saw, this is, imagine having the name Isaac Mizrahi and not being the designer. And this is about a couple that got married, and the husband's name is, or the groom's name is Isaac Mizrahi.
Yeah, I do like the vows column. It's like a little gossip. It's as close to page 6 as the New York Times is going to get.
All right, let's talk about Sunday Review and the news that's coming in. And we haven't, and I'm sorry, I've not looked at the comments in a while. So Neil, if you want to throw on some comments, or if you want to just read some of the comments, you're welcome to do that too. I've been so focused on the paper, Neil. So if you want to do that, or just put them on the screen.
This is a genius section, I think, because if you feel like you haven't caught up on the whole week of information, like it's all right here, and it's much thinner than the front page of than the front section of the paper. So it's really smart. This is a section I hope that never goes away.
Thank you. I agree. And David Clint says, I'll be back in New York soon, so perhaps we can do this together. Yes, that would be great. And if you do include guests talking about their local newspapers. We would love that. We have gone to the Washington Post and read with the deputy editor of the Washington Post. We've read the Toronto Globe and Mail in Toronto. So we've done things like that before. And the Atlanta Journal is a paper that we got a lot of attention these last few weeks with the last week with the shootings. And of course, all that's going on in Georgia the last few months, good and bad. Miriam says, I have a digital subscription, but miss so much. Sometimes I look up stories that I've first seen on your read along. Thank you very much. Let's look at some of the other comments coming here. Emily says, Tim says, another incredible show. Let's look at Emily's comment. My daughter and I have watched Chinese and Korean teen just out of college rom-com dramas during the pandemic. Fantastic. And Nicole says, our neighborhood park in Delhi just unveiled 3 huge signs that ask dog owners to please use shit bags to pick up after their pets.
I appreciate the clarity in that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about what they're talking about. Robert Murray asks, are there any reviews about the reopening of AMC theaters?
Oh.
I don't know. I don't know if they have that. And let's keep going here. Lots of comments, and apparently more about the cereal box story. Then all of his ex-girlfriends showed up and revealed the Cinnamon Toast Crunch shrimp tail guy was kind of a shrimp himself. Doesn't sound so great. So I guess that's what happens in the internet age. Lots of interesting things here. Mark says, can agree that I miss time with friends who live in other parts of my city. And that's certainly something that we wish would be helpful to people who want to meet others. And so that's something we can look forward to. Resisting erasure through grace. Did racism or theology or gender motivate the shootings in Georgia? And it could be all three. Let's see here. Stop it with gun control. Enough already. Language matters. This language doesn't help. So I don't know what Frank Bruni's column. Is he asking for gun safety or gun reform or some other term? We had Trish Hall with us, the one of the former opinion editors of the New York Times, and we talked about the impact of using the word global warming instead of climate change from the start, and how that affected. Language does matter in these things.
Yeah, language, it's mostly marketing, frankly. We went from gay marriage to marriage equality, and suddenly, that idea was much more palatable to a lot of people. They could get behind something that was about equality, but not something that was about gay marriage. And I think that if we do find better language around gun control, there could be some persuasion there. When we do our work and trying to find the best of the worst on the internet, the two camps, there's the gun control camp and the gun rights camp. And if you put them into a TweetDeck columns, they have their own language and their own terminology. So somebody who's into gun control would probably not talk about the Second Amendment. They would probably talk about AR-15s and the like, whereas somebody who wants gun rights we'll talk a lot about the Second Amendment and other buzzwords. But, that's why our former president was so good at Twitter. He was great at using marketing language around that's really catchy. And so if people can come up with something other than gun control, because you don't want to be controlled by anything, and you certainly don't want gun equality, I guess, so that somebody is going to have to come up with something that resonates and that people stick to until something is done one way or the other around guns.
Thank you. Let's see here. Carla reminds us that we also visited the newsroom of the Record in North Jersey. That was a great day. People are recommending other papers, including a paper from rural Alaska. Mark says he would do the paper in Durham or the News and Observer from Raleigh. So this is great. And Diana says Aimee might sign up for the New York Times print issue, as the kids' pages for her 9-year-old son are great. My girl loves this section. And so great to
I like the recommendation.
See all that. And Thomas Joe says hi and says, so wonderful to see Aimee on your program. She was a gifted student in high school back in Fort Wayne. I love hearing her thoughts on today's issues. So what we're going to do is take a look at the kids section for just a minute. I know Neil has that ready, and so he'll put that on the screen right now. And folks, if you're just joining us, this is the Sunday New York Times Read Along. That's Aimee Rinehart, and check her out on Twitter, please, and do follow her. And Lisa, by the way, says, very good point, Aimee. I'm not sure which exact point, but all of your points have been great, so it works at any point.
So, Shri, we do have the New York Times for Kids. The lighting isn't great in this corner on my desk, but we will take a look at it. What's interesting is that this section, it's got all these smiley face emojis, if you can tell. And the focus is feeling meh. Let's talk happiness. Living through the Texas blackout, kids tell all pandemic mental health, the do's and don'ts of feeling good, your vaccine timeline, and an interview with Michelle Obama. So that's not a bad get for the New York Times for Kids. And of course, we should always remind folks, one, that this is a print-only special section, the last Sunday of the month. And it's put out by the New York Times Magazine team, Amber Williams in particular. And the editors note this section should not be read by grown-ups. We will do this. And there was a comment earlier, Aimee. I know that my daughter, she's turning 8 in just 2 weeks, but she enjoys several of these sections as well. They have encouraging people to write for inside the New York Times for Kids. And what's neat is that they have an Inside the Times section for kids as well. The New York Times Insider column is actually one of my favorite pieces of the paper. Here's an explainer on how Texans are recovering after the storm. A mental health check-in for kids. That's we don't talk enough about mental health for adults, much less for kids, particularly with the pandemic. Here is this is again, I mean, right on the money as they're doing, starting vaccine tests for kids, explaining that it's just a pinch and giving a lot of the background. I know that my daughter was a little worried about getting another shot. She doesn't like her vaccines, but she knows that this one is going to be important once they're ready for her. Here's a piece by Laurel Neme, not sure about how to pronounce her last name, how animals show they're happy, if you can see that. Not surprising that Michelle Obama's piece is about cooking and eating good nutrition, but that's again a great get for the New York Times for Kids. And then they have a section, the food that makes me happiest. Have you checked out the New York Times for Kids before?
No, but I'm absolutely going to be subscribing to it. My son, he gets Boys Life magazine, and I just subscribed to Highlights because he just loves getting something in the mail, and I think he would really enjoy this. I grew up watching, the 6 o'clock evening news, and there's something, I think it's the music and the authority of the broadcaster's voice. It really started my love and interest in news. And we watched NBC Lester Holt. And my son and I watch it every night, and he always ends, take care of yourself and each other. And my son takes the first part of that, and I take the last part of that. So I think starting kids off early, which is absolutely what the New York Times is trying to do, is to build these generational, I don't want to say addictions because this is a positive thing. But starting these these digital habits early, or these reading habits early, and the reliance on holding the page, because I will talk about this later. I think print is dead, but but I really love the feel of newspaper in my hands and to see where I am in terms of reading. I understand the paper better than I do the online editions.
And we'll definitely want to talk about the idea of print is dead. And the role of print. Of course, every week we celebrate the print edition of the Sunday Times. We've had a number of people subscribe to the paper based on watching this show. But there is a great, they do a lot of great stuff online, a lot of the videos, a lot of the display. We'll talk about the burlesque article a little bit later. That's only in the New York City Metro edition in print. But online, you can see the full layout. The centerfold for the New York Times for Kids is really interesting. Happiness is yours. What does and doesn't make you happy according to science? Everything from don't spend too long on social media, do laugh with friends, don't be alone too long, do set a new goal down here at the bottom, do go outside, don't try to do everything at once. I mean, this is all, I've always thought that a lot of these pieces of advice are just as good for adults as kids, and a little bit more accessible for some adults.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to tape it next to my desk.
Yeah, this is good. This is good for everybody to have these. Let's just look at some of the comments coming in. Emily says, my daughter is a huge fan. She completed a survey for them and is quoted this week, which is really cool. Let's see if you can find that.
I was looking for it. I thought it was going to be on this page. It might be on a different page. And I know that Laura gave us the heads up on that. If Emily can remind us of her name, I'm actually not seeing it. I wonder if it's not in this edition or if it's on a different page.
And Linda says she became a Sprint subscriber last June after watching this show. So that's great. And she's a great decision. Sorry, Amy, you were saying?
Just that, talk about user engagement. This basically the page that you're looking at now is taking a page from social media and putting it in, basically. It's like, the reader comments and then they get their photo and the quote, and then, this person's, daughter reads this quote. And so they are building a lifetime subscriber.
Brad Rinehart says, good morning and hello, Amy, from your cousin, Brad. Really cool listening to your thoughts and responses on these columns. Your Indiana family misses you and loves you. How sweet is that?
And Amy, thank you for letting us be live on your Facebook page and your Twitter account. That's what makes this possible. One of the things about the column, the responses in this section, it gives you a clue to their audience. Most of the kids are aged 9 and 10. All of them, I think, are 9 and 10. So it gives you a sense of their target audience.
All right, already. I'm going to subscribe.
And here is Melissa. Tell us about her.
She's my sister. She's executive director of a food bank in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So she's definitely been a frontline worker. Really proud of her too. And so she does a lot of the speaking stuff in our family. So,
well, Melissa, thank you for what you're doing. You and your colleagues in the food bank business are so vital and so important. It's sad that we depend on food banks to feed Americans, but that's the world we're in now.
Yeah.
And just finishing out the New York Times for Kids section, and if Emily has her daughter's name, I want to take a look, see if we can find that comment, because I know that Laura sent me the screenshot.
Lucinda on the happiness page.
On the happiness page. Let's go back. Maybe it must be in the actual centerfold here. I didn't realize. I don't see it. Oh, here we are. Okay, so there's small little comments in here. There's Adelia, Nika. There we go at the very top. So don't spend too long on social media. If you see that comment just to the right, when the pandemic is over, I'll be so much more grateful for the things I took for granted, like riding the subway and eating at restaurants. Lucinda Silverman, 17. Nice. So that also gives you another insight. The quotes on this page are from 11-year-olds, from 12. Lucinda might be at the higher end of the target audience for New York Times for Kids. Thank you for the assist on that, Emily. Appreciate it. Sorry we couldn't find it.
This section is so well put together, and I would imagine if I were a page designer at the New York Times, I would call dibs on this first.
And it's interesting you should mention that, and I'll see if we can find it later. But the New York Times is hiring for an art director, and the gift that they put up really was like highlights of the last several weeks, several months in terms of their layout. While we're talking about print direction, hat tip to Wayne Camadoy, a great friend of ours and supporter of the show. We'll take a look at the burlesque section in just a moment. Finishing out the New York Times for Kids, they have a full-page coloring page for folks as well. come in. So it's a sign for your room. The top says "come in," the bottom says "do not disturb" upside down. If you want to turn that. How old is your son, Aimee?
He's 9 and
9?
already has some do not disturb signs on his door, so this one would be perfect.
Luckily, my daughter has not reached that stage yet. She has closed her door once or twice, but hasn't gotten to do not disturb. So that's good. And this is the back page of the New York Times for Kids featuring Michelle Obama again. I guess there's something streaming on Netflix, waffles and mochi. So
I didn't see any advertisements in that section.
No, there aren't any advertisements, which is really great. Which is one of the things that I appreciate about the New York Times for Kids. And so what we're going to do.
Keep reading the comments here.
Sure.
Stephen says this New York Times section is a keeper, and yes, especially the page design with Wayne Kamadoy. Here is Emily saying truly extraordinary section, and then Melissa, your sister, says this was awesome. I'd love to see this with the JG locally. Yep. So she's tagging someone. And by the way, folks, please tag a friend right now who would enjoy this conversation. They can watch it as soon as it's over on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So do tag a friend. Please hit share, as I saw Pradnya do before, and others have done as well. Thank you very much to everybody who's watching. We have about 15 minutes left with Aimee before we start wrapping up. So Neil, do you want to just show that burlesque?
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, mentioning Wayne. Wayne did the art direction for the burlesque section, not New York Times for Kids, just in case there was any confusion on that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
While you're pulling that up, here's someone saying, Aimee, how about a shout out to your friends from Brussels?
Oh, yeah. Well, the Brussels, shout out to all my friends in Brussels. I was there for 2 years. I was there most notably for September 11th. And that's when I realized I went from working on the New York Times Online, where I was like, this online business isn't going to be real for another 20 years. I went back to print thinking, oh my gosh, I love a completed deadline. I love the feel of the print. I love working with everyone to the run up to a deadline. But then, September 11th happened and I felt like I wanted the news now. I wanted more news. I didn't want to have to wait another 24 hours. And that's when I really had a felt sense of like, this print stuff, while I love it personally, and I will always enjoy my days at Paste Up and using Quark Express in the early days to do pagination, it's just kind of over because it doesn't satisfy that. I want to know right now what's happening. In 2 weeks ago, did we have the shooter's name? How many people are injured? That kind of stuff. And people aren't going to wait for 24 hours. So it'll be interesting to see if the New York Times does something to adjust their print edition, meaning maybe print edition is for big magazine-y style articles. And then if you want the latest and greatest, you have to go to the website or something. I mean, there will have to be some kind of, there will be some people who get left out of that, right? Not everybody is online, but the majority of people are online. And
I think what you're describing is the reality that we have. For breaking news, you can't rely on print anymore. It's not, things change, within hours. I think one of the things that's interesting, and forget about I check the New York Times on my phone, a dozen times a day, just idly. I'll check back, see what's new, if anything has been updated. But really, if you really want breaking news, if you want to see kind of what's up to the minute, my go-to is Twitter. That's where you get, really quick hits and latest information if there's a shooting, et cetera. And I want to make a special reference to not just the Virginia Beach, but also the shooting in Boulder last week and Atlanta the week before. It's just incredible that we're still suffering from this epidemic of gun violence. But as far as the New York Times is concerned, what they are doing is these special print editions. They're special sections they put out. We always highlight them on the Sunday read along, and we'll see the burlesque section in just a minute. It's great online. But there is something special about a feature like that in print when you can set aside In the last several, they did a carnival in winter section a few weeks ago that was incredible. So there's a role for print, I think, but you're right. It's for special features, and one of the things that Wayne was telling me over email is interesting that there's not as much space for special sections. It used to be just special sections on Sundays. Now it comes in whenever they can fit it, and the timing is off. You do a special section, a special report may go online whenever it's ready, whenever they're ready to publish it, but the print may be 2 weeks later because that's when it works for print. So they're not wedded to the idea of simultaneous publication, which I think is interesting.
And that was rare because when I was at the New York Times Online, they didn't want to give us, they meaning the traditional newsroom, didn't want to give us articles until they had been filed and were almost ready to go to press. So we would publish at 12:01 every night.
I remember.
And then it was, they were going to start, and this is where Carla Baranauckas enters our worlds and really gives our young team that validation from 43rd Street, because she had so much journalism in her background, where she came in and validated us, but she worked on the continuous news desk, which many on the 43rd Street side call the relentless news desk. So it wasn't a welcomed endeavor. And I think they were, the newsroom was really grappling, like most newsrooms, with this this digital disruption. And they didn't see that a lot of people thought that it was a fad, something that would go away. And, that is a big problem and challenging for a place like the Times, because those are newsroom leaders who are like, I don't trust Twitter. Well, we don't trust Twitter either, but it is a place where ideas get launched, where news starts to trickle in. And then you have to, of course, do what my organization does, which is verify that information.
Sure. And Miriam is mentioning that the print edition could have a barcode or maybe a QR code that leads to the latest update online. I think that would be great for breaking news. The New York Times Magazine already does that. You can scan the image, scan the cover, and go right into the online version, particularly when they have more features and more content online. Let's take a look at the burlesque special. I have these as graphics on the screen. It starts off, it's the front page of the Metropolitan section, which is interesting. And it is then continues on page 5 of the Metropolitan section, which is interesting. So it's really, I think the photography is incredible in terms of the story that they're telling. And if you look at the last 2 pages as well, as we flash on the screen in between, that's really what stood out for me, is in terms of the photography. And there's a great insider piece in today's paper as well that talks about how they did the photography and how they made that look really, really great. So let's go ahead and take a closer look as well. I'll go ahead and pull that up for you. So this is that front page of the section, and if you scroll down, this is where the layout. It's a 1-page layout on screen, but they long to be visible. It's always all about the year of isolation for burlesque performers, and what it's been like. And if I'm not mistaken, it's page 5, and several pages online. In the New York City edition. In the national edition, it's 2 pages black and white, which just doesn't do it justice, unfortunately.
Yeah, there is something about the crispness of photos online.
And this, all right, folks, we're starting to wind up here. There's so much news that is going on. We didn't get to cover everything, but it's been so great to hear from Aimee. Patricia says the Obits are updated hourly on a digital subscription, which is interesting. And we also want to let you know that if you know someone who has passed away, there's a new social app that you can use to pay tribute to them. Check out, it's called Miss You Graham, and you can find that on iOS. I think that's really interesting. And as we were discussing earlier with Aimee, this use of Obits and all these other ways in which print and digital connect and don't connect is kind of fascinating for all of us to see. So I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about your work with the Wall Street Journal. What was that like in addition to working with these other places?
Yeah, it was, well, like I said, I was online at the New York Times, and I left for a couple of reasons. One, I was really frustrated because I felt like I was going to spend the next 10 years copying and pasting, because back then there were just news producer jobs and then night editor jobs. And news producer jobs, those were one of the rare, we were one of the rare digital shops that was part of the guild. So we were union employees. And so that granted us all kinds of double time and overtime and worker protections that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So to me, a promotion didn't feel like a promotion if I was going to make probably less money and have fewer protections. So the other thing was I just wanted to live in Europe. I never studied abroad. You know, I went, and this was a real opportunity. And so, and it was the print edition. And like I said, I really like, you know, I think I'm a craft-oriented person. I really like to finish a job. And there is nothing sweeter than locking up a paper at like 10 or 11 at night and thinking, all right, there it is, mistakes and all. With the web, it is unending. You know, there is no amount to finesse and refining and further correcting. It just doesn't end. So with the print edition, it was great. It was wonderful. I worked with amazing colleagues at the Wall Street Journal. It was an international group, all united through the English language. Lucky for me, because that's the only language I really speak well. But it was an amazing opportunity to understand how the U.S. is perceived internationally. That kind of rocked my world when after September 11th, where everybody's like, oh, are you okay? Like, you're an American, that's too bad. And then about 2 weeks later, the word comeuppance starts getting used, that the United States had their comeuppance with this. And it was like, what are they talking about? And so, you know, it got me out of my own bubble. I learned how to eat and drink there, which was really nice as a grown-up. And the work we were doing was interesting. And what was interesting for a colleague of mine was she went to go work for the Wall Street Journal in New York. And she said, oh my gosh, they return your calls in New York. And it's because the Wall Street Journal is the lesser known of the two financial papers in Europe. The Financial Times, of course, is king throughout the continent, whereas the Wall Street Journal, people will maybe get back to you, but maybe not right away. So it was interesting to work for a flagship paper somewhat under the radar. And again, to be lucky enough to work on print again. I will always have, my first love is print. And I will always think of it in a fond way, but the more I get used to having updates every 15 minutes on something, the more I see some of its limitations. And certainly some of the lack of support that newsrooms get now, and how under siege they are financially. It really makes journalists' jobs harder every day, to be under-resourced, to be expected to produce articles and also be on social media and also engage with audiences and all that stuff. So more than ever, journalists are being demanded. There's more being demanded of them more than ever. And the financial support just isn't there. So I really worry about the longevity of people working in news, like who can really stick in this business. I don't know if you probably saw during the Capitol riots, there were a couple of photos of Murder the Media going around, and it's just, we're in really unprecedented times. So to get it from both ends, to get it from the company and to get it from the public, all this negativity, it's really hard. So my hat is off to anybody who's willing to commit journalism this day and age. It's tough in the US. It's even tougher in places like Brazil and the Philippines. And so, I just have a lot of respect for people who are willing to put themselves out there and answer my question is, what happened? What happened? And they're willing to fill that in such a great way. And the New York Times is certainly one of the best at it.
So beautifully put. Thank you very much. Before you go, let's do another plug for First Draft News.
Well, great. We have really amazing boot camps coming up through to the end of April. We have 30-minute sessions on how to identify, verify, and responsibly report on mis and disinformation. But it's also for the public too. If you care about the things you see online, you can sign up for these free courses. They're available in 9 different languages in 3 different time zones. So I'm very, very, very happy about that project. We also had during the US election, and it's still active, an SMS course. So let's say you don't want to commit to a 30-minute session. You can get daily tips for 2 weeks sent to your phone. And I think we have links to that Neil will share with you on how you can sign up to both. But First Draft, I think we really strive to make these resources accessible, meaning you don't have to be some digital diva to understand how these tools work. And that these tools are part of being a responsible digital citizen in 2021.
Awesome. And so on that note, we will thank Aimee for being here with us. We have a couple of announcements that we need to make, Aimee. So we're going to let you get back to your Sunday. What's on tap for the rest of your day?
The rain really upends everything. So definitely not a hike, but I suspect some board games and some popcorn is in store for us.
Excellent. Thank you very much for giving us this time. We're really honored that you'd be with us.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. And folks, we have a couple of quick things to tell you about, including the fact that we are taking next Sunday off for Easter, and we will be back on April 11th with the amazing Andy Revkin, who was the pioneering environmental reporter at the New York Times for many years, and he's doing incredible work at Columbia and just somebody you should all get to know. So Andrew Revkin will be our guest on April 11th. And Neil, you have more to tell us.
Absolutely. So in addition to Andy Revkin, we want to make sure you know about our upcoming shows. We talked about She's on Call earlier, which will start at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Shri will take my role and help executive produce the show, hosted by Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. Later in the week, our friend Stefan Kaplan will be hosting the Spin It Social Hour, where photographers share their work and journeys. You can catch his show Thursday, April 1st at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 p.m. Central European Time, because his guest is from Sweden. Definitely a great show. Definitely check that out. And then in addition to those shows, Shri, we have some announcements to make. We talked about Social Media Weekend last week. Social Media Weekend is coming back May 21st and 22nd. And for everyone who attended Social Media Weekend in the past, you should have gotten a special invite in the mail. You may need to check your junk mail and spam, but we encourage you to register early. Early bird tickets go on sale this Friday. So we will be certainly posting about that on social media and sharing the links in next week's New York Times read along.
If you didn't get the email, please check. Please write a note to Linda@DigiMentors.group. Linda@DigiMentors.group, and let her know that you should have gotten that alert. Also, there's a mention of it in the newsletter this week, my Sunday note, so you can find that there as well. But this is going to be a fantastic conference with headliners, panels, opportunities to learn a lot. It's all online, Friday night and Saturday during the day. It'll also be recorded for folks who are in other places and can't join us live. And it's going to be an amazing online opportunity. So please join us for that.
And Shri, since you mentioned the Sunday note, we would be remiss if we did not pull it online and show people your lead story is about Medium, Substack, and our collective need for good editors.
So thank you to everybody who subscribes. Please open it up if you haven't opened it in your inbox already. Otherwise, you can sign up at srinet.substack.com. I'll just mention this image you see here. I was so mad that Biden got asked if
if Vice President Harris is going to be his running mate in 2024, 2 months into the new administration. And it's not like it's something that happens with every administration. There's so much worry that the elected vice president will get dropped in the next election. The last time it happened was in 1944 when FDR did it. So this is an example of, there was so much buildup that we need press conferences. We need them. They didn't ask a single question about the pandemic, nothing about gun reform, nothing about the rise in anti-Asian hate. This tells you that this is not right when there's so many pressing things to talk about. Chitachi says, thank you. This was great talking about the show, and thank you everybody for coming here, and see you in 2 weeks, says Linda. And Laura says, great show. Loved hearing about the early days of the New York Times online. Neil, if you have those photographs, it'd be great to just show them again very quickly for those who missed them, so they can go back and watch the early part of this episode. We had a picture of the launch day of the New York Times website in 1996. Our friend Kevin McKenna right there. And we also had a picture of our guest, Aimee Rinehart, sitting at her old desk at the New York Times. And you can see she's got that ergonomic keyboard from Microsoft that I couldn't ever figure out. And look at the size of those monitors. And just great to see her there as well.
And as a reminder, I was going to say that what the New York Times looked like online in the early days. This is a larger image, of course, but it was, if you can imagine, an image map where you clicked on specific sections to go to an article. What Aimee was telling me earlier was that it wasn't until they started putting different sections online that really made a difference. Oh, we have a guest joining the show.
Hi. Hello.
Emily, do you want to say hi to everyone? You're live online.
Hi.
Hello.
She didn't realize.
Hi, we're almost done. We'll be done in 90 seconds or so. We do want to thank our incredible team.
Absolutely.
Neil, of course, and Carla, Steve, Paula, Julia. Thank you very much. We also want to tell you about this incredible newsletter that Carla puts out. It's called A Local Connection, and it's how to take big story ideas and make them work for local reporters, and their pro tips every week. So you can just find it at bit.ly/local news tips. So bit.ly/local news tips. This is a really useful tool for journalists at all levels everywhere in the world would benefit from subscribing. So do check it out.
Great. And with that, we want to wish everyone happy Pesach. And for today with the Seders, yesterday and tomorrow, and then also Passover, and then happy Easter next weekend. We won't be live next Sunday, but we will be returning April 11th, as you mentioned.
With Andy Revkin, and happy Holy to all the Desis watching, and also Palm Sunday. So lots going on holiday and holiday-wise right now. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. A personal note, I shared a few weeks ago that I got my first vaccine. Right after this show, Pam and I are going to get our second Pfizer shot. So we're very excited about that, and encourage everyone, if you can, register, get the shot. It looks like we have enough vaccines for everyone. It looks like there's going to be a surplus at some point. And just get it done. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.